listener production.
Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. It's no secret that we all love a bit of smutty content, from 50 Shades of Grey to fairy porn, and our latest obsession is all to do with gay hockey players. But its main audience might surprise you.
Women overwhelmingly dominate the audience for romance in general. So romance as a genre has historically and is still primarily written and read by women. And often, I think it's important to say, and often denigrated and dismissed on that basis.
So why are straight women the ones snapping up male-on-male erotic stories? That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It is Friday, the 12th of December.
Hey Sash, Tom Silvani has been identified as the high-profile Melbourne man found guilty of raping a woman after a suppression order in his case was lifted. The 23-year-old is the son of former AFL player Stephen Silvani, who played for Carlton between 1985 to 2001. His brother Jack currently plays in the AFL for St Kilda, and his mother Jo is also a TV personality.
Silvani was convicted last week of digitally raping a woman as she slept in January last year. His family had hired top lawyers to try to keep his name suppressed, citing mental health concerns and worries about the impact it could have on his well-known family. So why can he be named now? Well, yesterday, Victoria's County Court lifted a suppression order that had been in place since charges were laid over the incident in mid-2024.
The judge ruling now that Silvani had been convicted of the crime, there was no longer a justification to keep his name and that of his family's secret. Silvani, who was taken into custody after the guilty verdict, is back in court today for a pre-sentence hearing.
At least half of all cigarettes in Australia are illegal, according to groundbreaking new research. So this report from the government's Illicit Tobacco and E-Cigarette Commissioner goes much further than estimates by the tax office back in October, which put the number of illicit durries in the market at about 20%, Chris. So that's a huge difference. It's also estimated that the revenue lost from the trade of illegal tobacco is between $7.7 billion and $11.8 billion. So that's the cash that the government makes from selling legal cigarettes, Chris.
And the Commissioner is warning the trade, which also includes illegal vapes, poses a serious risk to public health, and that tougher penalties, an increase in policing and new laws should be looked at to clamp down on the industry. She's warned against cutting the government excise. That's what makes cigarettes so expensive here in Australia, saying it would see more people take up the habit. But researchers from independent think tank E61 will release a paper today that argues a cut in the excise should be considered, as expensive cigarettes are driving smokers to purchase cheap black market packets. Cheap black market packets, Sash, that you can pick up for $15. And when you compare that to what a regular packet is costing, you're looking at around $50 a pack.
It's insane. And I went back and looked at how much cigarettes were costing in 2015, and they were about $25 then. And I remember at that time everyone going, oh, cigarettes are so expensive. And obviously we've had inflation since. That affects, how we view how much things cost. But still, $25 versus $50 now, that's effectively doubled. It's doubled the cost of cigarettes. Then that's this excise that's going up. So these researchers from E61 are going, well, we should consider lowering the price of cigarettes, because what they're saying is people are being driven to the black market because they're addicted to cigarettes and they want to buy the cheapest ones. Most people can't afford to spend $50 every 2 or 3 days on their habit.
Yeah, and when we talk about this black market, it's not like this secret thing that you have to go and find illegal cigarettes.
In a back alley.
It's not like that. You can readily get them at most tobacconists. So, yeah, very interesting to see if anything changes in this space anytime soon.
Overseas now, OnlyFans creator Bonnie Blue will be deported and blacklisted from entering Indonesia for at least a decade after she was investigated for pornography-related offences. The 26-year-old was arrested over the weekend in Bali following a raid of a studio north of Seminyak, which police say was being used to produce obscene videos.
Hey boys, those that are going to schoolies and to those that are barely legal, cannot wait to meet you, and I'm in Bali, so you know exactly what that means.
Now, if you need a reminder, Bonnie Blue is that OnlyFans creator who kind of went viral last year at schoolies in Australia because she was asking barely legal, so 18-year-old teenage boys who were there to celebrate the end of school to come and meet her and do with that what you will. But at least 14 Australian men, mostly they were in their 20s, were at the property at the time of the raid. They've been released, but authorities did seize cameras, contraceptives, Merch with the words Schoolies Bonnie Blue on them, sex toys and 2 utes, one of which had been marked with the words Bonnie Blue Bang Bus.
Yeah, Indonesia's head of immigration held a press conference yesterday saying Blue and her team had breached their visa privileges by creating content and driving without a proper license while on a tourist visa. And he also flagged that their 10-year bans could be extended, so that's just a minimum here. It's understood that Bonnie Blue and her 3-man crew, which included Australian comedian Julian Woods, would be deported as soon as the police investigation wrapped up. Now, just on that investigation, producing pornography is a serious criminal offence in Indonesia. It carries a pretty big jail sentence and big fines. But what the police have found is that the studio that they raided was really staged in a way to just look eye-catching for social media. They couldn't find any evidence that, actual pornography or pornographic material was being produced in that way. They did find a video on one of the people's phones, but they found that it hadn't been distributed, which means it's that one step short of becoming a criminal offence. So Bonnie's kind of gotten away with it here. She's no stranger to controversy, like you mentioned, Sash. And we actually did interview Bonnie last year at around that whole Schoolies drama. We'll pop a link to that in the show notes should you wish to listen.
To the US now, where rules around travel and immigration have been in the spotlight this week, and that's continuing with a brand new visa being announced that'll cost applicants $1 million. So Donald Trump has unveiled the Gold Visa, complete with its own website, that will offer residency to foreigners in record time by letting them hand over $1 million to expedite the application process. So an image of this card has been released by the White House, and I don't think you get an actual physical card when you are given residency, but this is all part of the pomp and ceremony that this Trump administration absolutely thrives on. So I'll describe it for you. The card is gold, surprise, surprise. So it's got this picture of the president. He's staring down the barrel of the camera looking very serious and very presidential. Superimposed over him is a bald eagle and the Statue of Liberty. And of course, all of that's laid over a beautiful wavy American flag.
I think you actually described it so well. I was about to recommend people to go have a look for themselves, but you did a really good description there. Look, it's been described by the Commerce Secretary as a much more powerful green card to ensure that the, quote, best people are coming into the country. This comes after moves by the White House to stop immigration from countries it's deemed undesirable. Trump making particularly offensive comments yesterday about places including Somalia, Afghanistan and Haiti.
And I say, why is it we only take people from shithole countries, right? Why can't we have some people from Norway, Sweden, just a few? Let us have a few.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Well, yesterday a plan to collect even more data from people travelling to the US by forcing them to hand over 5 years' worth of social media data was released by the White House, and that's a move being looked at as a way to reject people sharing anti-Trump opinions online. And if you want to learn more about that, we actually deep dived it yesterday afternoon. Again, a link to that will be in the show notes.
And Time magazine has announced its Person of the Year, but this time it's not just one person, but a whole group, the architects of AI.
Thank you, Chris and Sasha. This is a great honor.
God, Sasha.
Sasha.
You're very welcome, AI. Look, the issue includes an interview with the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, who is widely considered the godfather of AI, and its cover story details how the tech has reshaped the world over the last 12 months, sometimes in frightening ways.
Yeah, Time's dropped 2 magazine covers, one with scaffolding around these giant A and I letters that look like massive machines being built, with some of the tech heavyweights around it in hard hats and high vis and little clipboards looking at it on different levels. Boop, 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 boop. And the second, which is a recreation of that iconic pic from the 1930s where construction workers were sitting on a steel beam above Manhattan. Instead of 11 iron workers, we got 8 tech leaders on the beam, including Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Huang, as well as the CEOs of OpenAI and Anthropic.
So this isn't the first time the magazine has actually given the title to groups of people or trends, even though it's Person of the Year. In 2017, it went to the Silence Breakers, which was in recognition of women who had spoken out about sexual abuse and harassment. In 1982, the Humble Computer was named to the Person of the Year. But, you know, it more often than not does go to a singular person. Last year, Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I mean, Time has spoken about that in the past. They've kind of said that the person of the year kind of boils down to the person who's wielding the most influence or doing something in the globe. It's not really an endorsement of their policies or their politics. Like Adolf Hitler was Time's person of the year back in the day, as was Joseph Stalin. So, very interesting to see what has been awarded this year. And I just don't like seeing this. I don't like seeing these people on the beams. I don't like them being celebrated in this way because AI is terrifying, Sasha Barbagat.
You love AI.
I love the tools.
Yeah.
I love when it's a tool, don't love when it starts replacing us. And I mean, these architects, not these ones specifically, but a bunch of the architects of AI have said, it's coming for us, it's coming for our jobs, it's coming for everything that we do. So whatever.
Just concede defeat.
Conceding defeat. But you know who's not conceding defeat? Our briefers, who are still in the running for a $100 gift card. That was a terrible segue.
Weird segue. But yes, we are trying to get you listening to jump on our survey because we want to hear about you. We want to know what makes you tick. We want to know what stories you want us to cover. We want to know what we can do better next year because we are all about you. We want you to be satisfied when you come to the briefing every morning.
Yes, and according to our head of engagement, the briefers have been coming in thick and fast with their favourite hosts. That's what's been coming through in the survey. And I asked him whether or not that was a good or bad thing for me, to which he said, time will tell.
Uh-oh, that's ominous. But yes, a link to that once again in the show notes. And yeah, you do go in the running to an $100 voucher as well. Hey, that is it for our headlines today and for the week. Thanks for joining us. Next up, it is Helen Smith's deep dive looking into the craze that is heated rivalry or gay hockey smut. Have a listen to that.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here. Women are obsessing over gay smut and a new hit TV show, Heated Rivalry.
Woo! Another f***ing day, huh?
Yeah, totally.
Is everything you dreamed of?
Almost.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
One study found women make up 87% of male-on-male romance readers, and one erotic audiobook platform also said that they commonly receive requests from straight women for male-on-male stories. So what's behind the rise of women loving gay smut? And why are they also the ones making a lot of the content? Darcy Green is an author of queer romance, including After the Siren. Darcy, why is it that cisgendered women overwhelmingly dominate the audience for male-on-male romance?
So I think it's useful to start thinking about that from the perspective that women overwhelmingly dominate the audience for romance in general. So romance as a genre has historically and is still primarily written and read by women. And often, I think it's important to say, and often denigrated and dismissed on that basis. So I think from all the stats I can see in terms of the percentage of women reading romance, it about lines up with the stats on women reading romance in general. But I do think that there are some reasons that romance can appeal specifically to cisgender women readers, and there are a lot of them. So I'll just try to give a very short and non-exhaustive list of some things that I think are relevant. And the first is perhaps obviously if you're attracted to men, you get double the men or triple or more. The possibilities are endless. So it's fun from that perspective. If you're into men, more men is probably a good thing. But more seriously, I think it can be a way of reading romance without bringing in any struggles that you might have about body image, sex, relationships. So if you're a cisgender woman reading about two cisgender men, then you're really a long way from your own embodied experience, and maybe that's what you want. And sort of as a non-binary person who was assigned female at birth, reading romance about two men can be a really nice break from sort of body dysphoria or from stuff in romance featuring female characters, which can be triggering of things that might make it uncomfortable, because romance is supposed to be escapist. And so it does suck if you're reading something fun and then you just run like smack bang into a wall of your own insecurities or something upsetting. And I think that is a factor.
And the TV show Heated Rivalry has kind of brought this conversation back into the headlines, and it's been dubbed Gay Hockey Smut. Now, why has this series been getting so much attention?
I think there's a lot of reasons. One of them is just because it's both very good and very fun and, to be honest, just very horny. And I think people probably need fun and sexy at the moment. The chemistry between the two leads is incredibly compelling. I think it might be like the best chemistry I've ever seen between two characters in anything on screen. And the book's also had a really committed and active existing fan base, which I think helped the show gain traction on social media. I mean, I also think there's an element where, firstly, it's about ice hockey and it was made in Canada, and obviously ice hockey is a huge thing there. So it's sort of as though someone made a really sexy queer show about two AFL players. A great idea, can I just say? And so that's obviously attracted some attention. And it's funny, the two actors who play the protagonists, Connor Story and Hudson Williams, they have matching tattoos that say sex sells. And I think obviously that's always going to be an aspect when you have a mainstream TV show that has some very explicit and very hot queer sex scenes. That's always going to get attention, some of it positive, and then I assume we are currently waiting for the negative attention that will inevitably follow from that. So I think people do like talking about things that are raunchy for various different reasons.
When did Gay Smut really start to gain popularity in the mainstream, and particularly for women?
I first started to see queer romance and I suppose like smuttier queer content being marketed as more mainstream around the time that stuff like Red, White and Royal Blue started to do really well. So there's a book by Casey Niquiston which is about the son of the first female president of the United States and the Prince of Wales. And it's a very fun queer romance. And I think that was the point where I started to notice queer romance being marketed as mainstream fiction in a way that it hadn't been previously. Because when I started reading queer romance, which was probably, 17, 18 years ago, it was very much you had to actively go and try and find it. And a lot of stuff was ebook only. Whereas I feel like as social currents have shifted and also as romance has gained more traction as something that people can read without sort of feeling like they have to hide it, queer romance has probably followed a bit behind because the queerness of it was still something that made publishers and marketers hesitant to push it. So I'm going to say in the last 5 to 10 years, I feel like there's just been a big shift in how queer romance is marketed and promoted.
Now, Rachel Reid, who wrote the best-selling series Game Changers that the TV show Heated Rivalry is based on, has said that many women like to distance themselves from the cultural baggage of heterosexuality. What do you make of that and this connection with women consuming more male-on-male romance?
I think it's definitely something that can appeal on a couple of different levels. Because as I think we already chatted about, there are so many social expectations and scripts around romance and dating for straight people. So there are some dynamics, for example, sort of enemies to lovers type stories, which I think can be quite off-putting sometimes when the characters are a man and a woman, because it can be very difficult to enjoy, say, a story about two people competing for the same job when they're existing in a sphere where there are all of these gendered reasons why a male character is likely to be promoted more easily or have faced fewer obstacles. And so I think when you move away from that, it means that sometimes people can enjoy dynamics and relationships that they might not in the context of a straight romance. If you are a woman or someone assigned female at birth reading a romance with a female character, it can be really easy to fall into comparison, or you read something and you sort of think, oh, like, God, that doesn't reflect me at all. Whereas reading a romance about two people of different gender to yours is just refreshingly different. And I mean, romance is often about fantasy and escapism, so that for some people, I think just gives you that fantasy and escapism.
With a lot of the authors of these male-on-male romances being female, how can we navigate this ongoing debate about women consuming and creating stories about gay male intimacy? Is it appropriation or is it something a bit more nuanced?
So to start off, I think it is more nuanced than that. And I should start by saying that I think anyone who is writing about characters with characteristics different to their own identity should be doing the work to be accurate and respectful of those stories. But I do think it's important to bear in mind both that history of women writing and reading romance, but also the fact that in a specifically queer context, queerness and gender identity are not immutable, and it might not be safe, for example, someone to be out as a trans man. But separate to all of those things, I think what troubles me about this is it's often underpinned by very bioessentialist and binary ideas about gender and sexuality, because queer men don't have a homogenous experience of intimacy with other men. And I think the way this issue is talked about can be very exclusionary to queer men who aren't gay and to trans and non-binary people. And it sort of perpetuates the idea that gender is the single most important thing to how you experience sex and romance and intimacy. So I think that while it's important to talk about things like who gets opportunities to publish stories, and it's always important to talk about representation if it is really problematic or perpetuating negative stereotypes, I do think that sometimes this debate skirts into the territory of reimposing binaries and ideas that have historically oppressed queer communities. And so I tend really not to like it when it's talked about on that abstract level. And so, you know, if someone has written a story that has problematic elements, then we should talk about that. But also, women are not the only people who do a bad job of representing queer people. The fact that I'm a queer person doesn't mean that I should be insulated from criticism if I do a bad job. So I feel like it's more productive to focus on the sort of stories and the way things are represented, and then to also separately look at who gets what publishing opportunities and that sort of thing, which is a really separate question to who can write what, rather than sort of saying, oh, women are appropriating queer stories. So that was quite a long answer, and the short answer is yes, I think it is more nuanced, but that's why I think it is a more nuanced question than it's sometimes posited.
Now, your book, After the Siren, is about two male AFL players and their romance. Were women also some of your biggest readers?
I think so. Based on comments that I get, I would say that I do have a lot of women readers, although I also get a lot of messages from queer men in particular. I would guess it would probably be about the same percentage, but I really don't know.
With Mitch Brown coming out as the first openly bi player to play AFL, do you think Australian TV is ready for something like your book to be adapted into a hit series like we're seeing with Heated Rivalry?
I would really like to think so. I'm obviously a little bit biased in answering this question, but I think that the response to the book has been really lovely. I think in general, audiences are open to those sorts of stories, and you see stuff like Heartbreak High, which had really awesome queer characters and exploration of queer stories that was really popular. So I like to think audiences would be ready for that and would enjoy it. I think whenever you're operating in that sort of sports context, there's probably going to be a vocal minority of people who are not ready and maybe never will be, but that just goes with, I think, telling any queer stories.
Darcy, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Darcy Green there, author of queer romance, including After the Siren. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. But before you go, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it as well. It's a really easy way you can support everything we do here at The Briefing. And you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.